remember, I think it's been over a dozen years now. I don't know, it's been quite a while.
I think, am I on?
Is he on yet?
Okay. So I think it was about 2006, 5 or 6,
Okay,
when we started crossing paths at Lori Carlock's house.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Is that
Yeah, Kevin, she'll probably give some feedback along the
Well, it
way.
was right before that, some Swan Canyon meeting, and then Lori invited us. There was
So a
this
big
Lord
party.
Swan was trying to get organized.
Right, the community had been battling against eminent domain for a little while. We started getting to know our neighbors and met Kevin and Becky. And
Yeah, and so and everywhere I go to a lot of events in the community, and Dennis, you're always there with your camera, taking pictures.
Yeah.
I don't know, you can flash up some of those slides and just click through as we go along.
yeah, so that's me at most events.
So share a little bit about yourself. I mean, when I go to coffee houses, people know you. I mean, you have been a part of the fabric of this community for a long time.
So when we moved into City Heights, we'd come from most neighborhoods where you go into your house, you shut the doors, and you sometimes see your neighbors maybe around holidays. When we moved into City Heights and started remodeling a house, thinking, oh, this would be a good flip, and we started to see the neighborhood and the neighbors, and literally people had not in 30 years walked down the alley where we purchased our house because Hells Angels had lived in the neighborhoods next door, the banks walked away from the places, but we started renovating and getting into the neighborhood, and we saw families putting roofs on houses and not hiring people, and gathering their families together for events, and instead of just having just random things done to your house and going out to work and coming home, there was community. And then we started cleaning in the canyons and working with people from Azalea Park, and got to know these connections, various places where we felt useful and needed and content in being in the neighborhood, and so we stayed. So that was 2004, and in 2005 we started meeting people, and in 2006 there was a group threatening to take our neighborhood. They wanted to take 88 homes from our community and build 500 condos, and it was a half-baked idea, but we had to battle against eminent domain all the way to the state and the federal level in order to stop the process. And so through that, we really did rally neighbors, getting to know everyone, and we all joined forces, and we won. We actually got the system shut down. We got it sunset at the state level, and through that, we met amazing people. And I have to admit that whenever I do meet somebody and we do start talking about things, and you find, oh, Nazarene, well, I've got a long history, you'll learn, with my family, but I also bristle a little bit because I worry about judgment, and so, but I met them, and they talked about, the Point Loma Nazarene University and various things, and through them, I felt only love, only support, and a common bond that really dates back decades. And in our short time of friends, we've really been able to, I think, see in each other the force of Christ working in our hearts and in our community.
Yeah, and that's great. And share with us a little bit about your heritage. Your heritage in the Church of the Nazarene goes far back. I don't know if we want to click through. I know Jim's got...
There's me, 1963. and I present that picture partly because I want people to feel that we all come from this innocence, from this days. And then we grow into losing teeth at 6. And then we'll stop here for a sec. My history with the Nazarene Church, from my personal perspective, goes back to 1934 with my maternal grandparents. So Brother Johnny and Sister Faith met in 1933, married in 1934, and he was a very silver-tongued evangelical minister in the Nazarene Church, ordained at a young age. She had taught herself to play keyboards and any instrument when she was a child, and was able to play keyboard, piano, organ, accordion. She took an accordion on the road, and the two of them, with his guitar and his words and voice and her music, they became a force in the revival circuit throughout the Midwest. And my mom was born to them in 1939, and by the time she was 6 weeks old, she'd been in 13 states, and so they were all over the place. In 1940, when my mom was about a year old, they divorced, and that was just something unheard of. And And that became sort of the crux of some things that I didn't know about. But my history back with the church were there through healing, licking her wounds and healing, and knowing that music was her passion and music was her gift from God and her music was her ministry. She remarried. That man adopted my mother. They started back into the church and resumed her passion. Grandpa would sing in the choir. She would play keyboard. Sometimes she would play piano and organ in a corner of a church simultaneously. And she taught herself as a child to play the organ with her toes because she was always afraid of losing the use of her fingers. She was amazing. And so they took this show on the road. But then throughout the time I was growing, my mom rejoined the church, and we started going to the Nazarene Church ourselves. And then goes on from there. I can kind of stop
Yeah,
there.
so that's your mom, grandma, and you can click through maybe.
Yeah, so that's my grandmother at the keyboard and my mom in the choir. And that's, of course, 1970s choir tours. My older brother and I with mom. And then that's me in the lower left there in one of those yellow shirts. Classic. Anyway.
So growing up in the church then, and being, your identity from as long as you can remember. I know we've talked about it before. Whereas I've never really thought about my sexual orientation. Growing up, it was just part of who I was, and you had talked about that too. That was part of who you were. But how did that impact growing up then in the church as you realized maybe your orientation was different than others?
Right. From the time I was young and 5 years old, and I had a roommate once ask me, well, when did you know? And I said, well, when did you know that I think you like girls? And he said, well, I don't know. I liked this girl's hair when I was in second grade. I said, okay, well, that was just where it was for me. And I learned, though, early on in grade school and in church and all that, to keep a separate life, to keep a separate truth, to just hide that aspect. And so throughout my childhood, throughout my, of course, teen years, I was mostly relegating myself to being just Dennis. And it wasn't Dennis and this or Dennis and that. I was just Dennis. And I was the third wheel. I was always the one to be trying to do a little extra. I always had keys to everything in church. I always ran the sound. I always did as much and more than I could in order to I think keep people from asking too many questions. I didn't explore, date, or do anything that was out of the ordinary, but I could, in good conscience, date women in our church because it was misleading. So I just kept to myself, organized choir tours and retreats.
I think there's a retreat picture, which
Yeah.
parts of it reminds me of my days.
Single-handedly, I would reserve a cabin in Arrowhead. I would gather all the money and gather all the things and make the menu and take all my cooking supplies in my car and go a day early and start this. And all the friends would start coming up, and we'd have a weekend of fun and Bible study and snow and just amazing times together. It grew so much as a family of friends. And I'm in touch with many of those people still. But I was, like I said, just Dennis. I was the extra person that they didn't have a lot of expectation, but it was hard on me.
So what did that lead to then, as you're not able to kind of be your true self? I mean,
Well, it's a real isolation because you aren't doing what everyone else is doing. You aren't, dating, getting married, and procreating within the church body. You're not doing what everyone else is doing. And so you do feel very left out. If there's any hint of things, you quickly say, look, squirrel, try to make a diversion for those things. And I can't say that I never felt loved, but I didn't feel complete in any way. Because the church has always been, the church and the body have always been fairly vocal or at least intent on keeping me relegated to the undercurrents and the outside. And when you do hear sermons against homosexuality, you hear people make jokes and comment and do these things, it eats away at your self-confidence, it eats away at your knowledge, and if you have no other bearing on who you are, in relation to the people around you, then you become very kind of despondent at a level that you can't explain.
And so when you moved away, this was Garden Grove Church in Nazarene, and you made your way here to San Diego, right?
Right.
Were you able to get replugged in, or what? How did life travel from that point, and how did you reconnect?
So in my 20s, I had an opportunity to take a job that took me to San Clemente first, and so I was making the drive up to church. And by then, I'd gone from Garden Grove Church to Nazarene, along with friends, to a vibrant group of things. Several of us moved over to Santa Ana first. We're having a great time. We're doing some of the same things, and it's interesting because now I have this crossover of friends between the two churches, because we would end up commingling the groups, and so I was the kingpin to pulling the two churches' college and career groups together. When I moved to San Clemente and I was making that drive, it became a little easier not to go, a little bit easier, and I started, when I moved to San Diego, I sort of felt like there was this alienation where if I wasn't part of the weekly things, I wasn't of value, and so I sort of, sat myself down and went, well, if they're not going to call me, and that's just the kind of gradual thing that I think we do for ourselves when we isolate by physical distance, and so then, and in hindsight, I'll step there now. In hindsight, it was as much my fault for not reaching out to them as it was, and there had to be a healing for myself to recognize that, I'm just as much to blame for not reaching out. But there were a few people that stuck by me, and I count them as my true friends, but Facebook was a giant reconnect. But to answer your question about what I did in San Diego, when I got here, I really missed the camaraderie of church. I missed the music, and I missed the fellowship. But I also, as I looked at, say, Mission Church or whatever various churches, I didn't feel connected, I didn't feel truthful, I didn't feel whole, I didn't feel comfortable going into a different church. While there are wonderful churches that are wholly accepting and very broad, openly LGBT communities, I didn't feel like I should have to change the church where the doctrine is more accepting. I should be able to go to my church and have that church accept me and that congregation be open and full in love for me. And so I opted to just step back, and gradually I built a community based more on spirituality, more on self-acknowledgement that I'm loved and that I'm often in the place I need to be when I need to be there. And I learned a little bit of that when I was still at Garden Grove, and I was in a small singing group, and it was very militant. We had to be there, and we couldn't miss a rehearsal, and very on target. And there was a point in time that I left home, and there was a young guy down the block, and every time I passed, we'd wave. It was kind of Midwest. And one time I passed, and I was passing, and he looked really sad, and he looked like he was about to cry. And I just pulled over and sat and talked with him, and it turned out that his stepdad was, difficult to deal with. His mom was working 2 jobs. He just needed an ear, and so just made that connection. Sat there for a little bit, and I think felt like he had elevated his spirits a little bit. And I left, and I got to church late, and I missed practice, and I got demerits and was asked to step down for 2 weeks. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Are we preaching to the world, or are we preaching to the choir? And it was such a hard moment to realize that here we are in a beautiful church with wonderful people that, and we're making beautiful music together, and I'm not given the flexibility to speak through, have myself spoken through by God to a human on the street that needs my time. The pastor's wife at the time, bless her heart, she said, I heard what happened, and I'm praying that you get back into the group. I said, well, I hope you're praying God's will, not Margaret's will. And it was really the first snarky thing I think I ever said in a church setting. But I felt it, and I felt truly abandoned at that moment by the people that I felt were trying to do the right thing, but not getting there.
It makes me think sometimes, with the church, we have our kind of strict rules, and we lay this out. And it reminds me of a conversation we had at the bottom of my stairs there at our house. the strictness sometimes in our rules that you've experienced in these statements of, I love you, Dennis, or versus kind of this idea of I love you, but, right? That there's like we're fencing in our love. Do you mind speaking a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So it became, I think Facebook was actually a wonderful thing for me because instead of crossing paths on occasions when I go up to an event at the old church and I'd see people, and you have to spend that time catching up and try to figure out what's going on, but you just get this little view. With Facebook, as we reconnected in 2008, 2009, when things started to become more, I'd get a face request here and a request there, and it was actually very cathartic to not have to come out to people on a case-by-case basis. And that's really a lot of energy to have that when you haven't seen somebody and they want to know, oh, how are you doing? And you've got a wonderful life, but you're worried about their sensibilities, you're worried about their feelings. So with that advent of Facebook, they could see my picture, they could see my family, they could see what was going on, and choose to engage a little more, and then either run scared under the guise of, oh my God, I love you, but. And that was always the thing, as I heard, I love you, but I have a problem with this. I love you, but God tells me. I love you, but the Bible says. And each of these statements was eating away more and more and more until the contrast came to light. And that was when I think we were battling Prop 8 at the time, and that was just a difficult time for families like ours. And I had a message from the college and career teacher that I had, and they were our constant friends and leaders in this group. And I spent summers with them in order to protect myself and preserve my heart. I would invest myself in families. So I'd spend time with them, and I'd re-roof the house and spend the summer and do this and that. And so I immersed myself in their family for a long time. But they held a little bit of the I love you, but that in the early times, keeping their distance. And then there was a point when I wrote a post that was about growing up gay and my spirituality in church and how that jived. And it was just this sort of healing writing that I shared out, and they read that, and I got a message back immediately, and he says, Dennis, I love you, period. And that moment in time told me the difference. I saw it, and I felt it, and what that did was he shared with me what had brought him to that point, and it was a difficult time he was having with his son and different things, and he caught himself, and he divulged to me that he caught himself with that sort of judgment air over him, and he realized, oh wait, my son gets it, he loves this person, period. And he chose to reach out to me. That started a healing right there. And in that, we've been able to, and I think we can move forward with this slide. So in 2008, by then I had been together with Jody since 2002. There were friends coming down from Portland. This is the core circle of people that I've remained in contact with. We drove up to Orange County, we got together, and this was a really great reunion where I didn't have to be anything but myself. They could meet Jody and they could be part of this world that I was in and feel loved and supported, and I didn't have to have that double conversation in my head. And so these people are wonderful. Go ahead.
I was just going to have them click through. I think there's a
Oh, and then, so this is Rick and Jan. So Rick's the one who wrote me that email, and Jan, his wife. And when I started this conversation with Becky, I wrote a few pages to just get it out of my head, and I adapted pictures to go along with it. But they came down, and they were in San Diego for a visit. We met up at Seaport Village, and these impromptu visits with somebody who says, I love you, period, is what I think we all want. And so, this is the culmination of feeling loved.
And the other day, when I met with you, we were talking about this. We were at one of your construction work sites. We were out on the sidewalk. And what really struck me about this thought of the church saying, I love you, period, to homosexual couples and to families. And you shared with me something that just broke my heart. It's been on my mind since then. God's used you in amazing ways in ministry. And with some of your friends, as their partners have passed away, the sense of isolation where the church or the community has created fences and not allowed them to connect and feel and love in a greater sense has created such a sense of isolation that I believe, if you don't mind me sharing, like 3 of your friends, after losing their partner of a lifetime, their spouse, have taken their own lives. With just this sense of isolation and loneliness. And God has used you in amazing ways to minister to different people. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about that.
Sure. I feel like, and back with various family members who have been, seemingly healthy, but then all of a sudden, I would feel like my grandmother had a stroke, and even in my 20s, we weren't going to get together at her house because, she needs her rest. It was for Easter. We always did Easter at Grandma's house. And in my 20s, I took the reins and just said, no, we're all going to go to Grandma's. We don't need to do the Easter egg hunt, but we're going to have a strawberry shortcake, and we're going to sit and talk. And we got there, and we all spent time there. And the next day, she had another stroke, and we had to make a decision, and she passed away. My other grandmother had landed in the hospital, and she felt she was fine. It was a broken leg, but she was facing some treatments for cancer. It wasn't imminent, it wasn't anything concerning. And I was talking to them, and Grandpa said, "Oh, don't come up today. Come up tomorrow. Grandma's going home." And I felt super compelled. And she passed away the next morning, but we had a moment and shared that moment. And I have learned to listen. My spouse has learned to listen when I say, I need to get back and see Dad. His health was bad for a number of years. I listen, and I go, and I act, and I go on that. And it is a ministry, and it is a feeling that I'm trying to do the right thing and be the right place. But with these friends, I think that we do have a circle. We do create our circle. We create our families, even if our own families can be a mess. And I think that's, most of us have learned that. But when, even whether it was known that there was a partner who was going to pass, or it was sudden, the remaining partner had a number of, people rally in the first days, and suddenly they're retreating, and you try to reach out, and they're retreating, and try to reach out, and then suddenly you see on Facebook that, rest in peace, and you're just searching back going, what in the world happened? Oh my, and you realize they were so lost and despondent, and they didn't have what I feel the church has always supplied. My family was a circle of people, but when you are feeling isolated, and you don't have this, you don't have the casseroles coming over, you don't have that, and people checking in, and they have just felt there's nothing worthwhile. And three couples has taken their own lives after their partners have gone. We have one who, so friends of ours, I met Kurt back in 2001, and he started seeing somebody, and they went into their bubble. And then I started seeing Jody in 2002, and we were in our bubble. But then when Jody one time was coming down for a visit, he said, "Oh, I'm gonna go see, go spend some time with my friend Philip." I said, "Oh, does he sell pharmaceuticals?" He's like, "Yeah." "Does he with the guy named Kurt?" "Yeah." And all of a sudden, it turned out that I knew Kurt and he knew Philip, and 2 people lived up there and 2 people lived here, but it was this crossing, and we all knew of each other prior. So in time, we've been with each other through being together, through battling things, through supporting them, and Philip had 3 daughters and family. And in 2008, when they got married, they asked me to perform their wedding ceremony. And that was a beautiful, beautiful honor to be able to do that. In 2010, they lost their 59-day-old granddaughter to SIDS. And I woke up, I saw that there was a mess, I saw what was happening. I left town, I met them in Riverside, and I got to be there. And Philip started calling me their family pastor. And so we navigated through all of that. That was healing through tragedy, where ex-spouse and other family members, they rally and spent all this time. So Kurt and Philip continue to build their lives. They've got 3 daughters, 3 sons-in-law, 5 grandchildren, and everything was going along swimmingly and beautifully. And Philip had just retired to take on another new job. They remodeled their house. And in September, I wake up to one of the daughters saying, "Not my dad, no." And I called her quickly, and because of my connection, I had everybody's phone number, and I'm getting a hold of everybody and finding out what's up. And overnight, Kurt thought that Philip was having a nightmare, shook his shoulder, no response, he was gone at 58 years old. And it was an immediate, creating a Facebook of circle the wagons for Kurt, get ourselves together, things the church would do, but we did that, and we got there. And within 2 days, I had written a eulogy, an obituary, helped create the service, and not expecting to do it, but performed a 2-hour service for 200 people because I was led to do it and compelled to do this. And when I write, it's from the heart. When I share, it's because people need to know, and need to hear, and need to feel love. So that kind of speaks to that. I know I ramble, but...
No, it's great. I think it kind of speaks to the loss that the church has in not rallying around our neighbors, despite differences, despite everything. But how do we know each other well? How do we be good neighbors at the church? But I'd love for you to share a little bit about, I know you have pictures of just, your life now. I don't know, I don't remember what it's all up there.
Yeah, so in 2004, when Gavin Newsom opened up the gates to our possibilities, we were looking at the news. It was Valentine's night. We were looking at the news, having a late night impromptu sushi dinner, and said, "Wow, isn't that amazing? There's history being made." And we looked at each other and went, "Let's get married." And we took the dog to doggy daycare. We loaded up our truck. The next day I had to empty it at the dump from our construction job. And we got in the truck and we drove to San Francisco and parked and stood in line for 15 hours in the rain. Well, it wasn't raining, it wasn't supposed to rain. The newscaster walked away from interviewing people and said, "Well, at least it's a dry night." But what we found, instead of the on the ground and in person, people are amazing. We get skewed by a lot of what we see with people who are behind hidden screens, behind keyboards. That makes it a little bit difficult. And so the experience we had was that there were amazing, loving, supporting people in line or walking to us, and allies from all walks that were there and sharing, "Here's hot chocolate, do you need an umbrella?" People bought up all the umbrellas at the Walgreens and on every corner in San Francisco and brought them to us. Gavin Newsom came out with donuts and orange juice the next morning and shared with us, and we got to do what other people take for granted. And so we walked up those steps at the City Hall in San Francisco, and we got to say "I do." And then a week later, it was taken from us. And so we had to get domestic partnership in 2006, and then that was sort of a half-baked thing. And then 2008, right before Prop 8, let's just get married now in case. Got married again. So we've said "I do" 3 times.
Wow.
In order to preserve some things that might help our family do things that everyone else takes for granted. Because without what they were producing, we had to go through machinations on that. But anyway, so that we were married, we were supported, we had a beautiful event, and yeah. So then in 2013 in February, we decided, we were talking to a friend, and she talked about going to see an adoption agency, and we're like, we've been wanting to have a child for a long time. Well, you should go too. So we made an appointment at the same day, same place in Chico, and flew up there, not telling anyone about it. They met us, they said, "Nice to meet you, it's probably gonna be a couple of years." Okay. Came home, signed a bunch of contracts, we had to earn some money here, people. And so we were just doing our thing, working on our jobs, and I get a call on April 16th, out of the blue, and they said, "How fast can you make it? A baby was born and you were chosen." 2 months after we started. And we shut everything down. We didn't tell anybody anything. We flew to San. We found out getting on the plane that she said, "Oh, you don't even know the general." Well, you know, we don't care. But she said, "Well, it's a boy." Okay, we're having a boy. Had a boy. Wait. And so we flew up there. We drove to the hospital. We met the birth mom, and we met him at 14 hours old, and they put him in our arms. And it was the most amazing thing to have happen. And so then 5 weeks later, some friends gathered together and we had a baby shower, and about 125 people came to our event. Family, people whose diapers I had changed, who have 3 and 4 kids themselves. Our community circle, Kevin and Becky and their family, and our circle has been created, but I think that kind of what you're thinking is that the church can add to that circle. There's nothing taken away from anything. But adding into that circle, people are just people. We seek to have love. We seek to protect our families. We seek to build up our community. And the differences that we have are not really different. We're more similar. What's that? Go ahead.
No, I think that's the bigger one.
That was Sam's first birthday party. His doctor and his nurse took the day off work to come to that. And Kaiser doctors see a lot of patients, so we feel really loved. So that's that.
Yeah. And then that's her family.
And then that's us now. That was.
She's a precious boy. Yeah. So I don't know if we, I know we've kind of gone a little bit long today.
Sorry.
Do we have a question or two?